There you go. All right. For those who don't know, my name is Folo Patterson. I am the author of the soon-to-be best-selling book, Looking Through the Fog. I'm sure a lot of you have seen the promos and skits and all the things I've been doing on Facebook and IG and Twitter. And as I've been doing this, I've been enjoying the process, but I didn't want it to get to a point where it seemed just like a bunch of smoke and mirrors. As people have been reading the book and we've been getting feedback on their experiences, I felt that it was about time to go a little bit more in depth. So this is the inaugural session of Conversations with Folo, in which is my intent to begin to talk with actual readers, those who have had a chance to journey through the pages, who have had a chance to experience the story, but also those who have come connected in one way or the other. So as we take this journey, I'm asking you to join in with me, and hope you enjoy these conversations we have. Tonight, for my first one, is Jasmine C. She is one of the first people who got a chance to experience the book in its manuscript state, and just her feedback really blessed my heart. So in doing this first conversation, I couldn't think of a better person to have than to start with her. So Jasmine, thank you for coming.
Of course.
Appreciate you taking the time to sit down and talk with me. As I've said many times before in conversation, I've been really enjoyed the feedback I've been getting from people, such as yourself and others. And it's been very rewarding to hear how the words I've been able to put on these pages have taken effect and affected people's lives.
Right.
But it's easy for me to say these things.
Right.
It's easy for me to shake the pom-poms and rah-rah about, hey, it's a good book, in comparison to those who've actually read it and can express it. So it's my hope that you can, kind of give us some insight into your experience, your journey, and where were you at when you first started reading? What was your expectation? Just kind of give us a little blow by blow about what it was like for you.
Well, I think at first I was introduced to it as a short story.
Mm-hmm.
So the word story stuck out.
Mm-hmm.
And okay, I mean, I'm a reader, I'm a bookworm, so I've read a lot of stories. Let's
Right.
see what this is about, right?
Right.
But I would say probably in the first 2 pages, it wasn't just a story. You know what I'm saying? It was more of an eye-opener. It was seeing it through the eyes of the different characters.
Mm-hmm.
I'm not getting too into depth of it, because you have to read the book, you have to start the book to understand that it introduces these characters that it's got a twist of it at the very beginning,
Mm-hmm.
right? Where you don't truly know who it is that you're following, or you're seeing this unfold through the eyes of. But as soon as you grasp it and it's unfolded to you, you realize that, whoa, wait a minute, this is speaking to me.
Yeah.
Right? It then becomes more of a revelation than just a story.
It's interesting that you say that, because as I had mentioned in the podcast interview, how initially I was told that chapter 1 might be a little slow.
Mm-hmm.
And for some people, it may not catch them at first because of how, I guess, it wasn't action-packed, or I don't know.
Right.
So there was a little concern for me as far as, will it be able to captivate a reader from the get-go? My biggest thing that kind of made me stand my ground in developing the way it was that I knew that a foundation had to be laid for what was to come. And so really kind of mapping out Thibodeau, the space he was in, was really important.
Right.
But also too, it was truly defining experience that I had went through,
Right.
to a certain extent.
Of course.
So as a reader, you now being introduced to Thibodeau and him in this new environment. Was it vivid in how it was portrayed? Were you able to Now, you've never been on the prison yard, of course.
Right.
Were you able to visualize what was painted?
Absolutely, absolutely. It was as if you were on the yard with him. It was as if you stepped off that bus with him,
Yeah.
right? Especially when he says, you know, he's now taking in his new environment, the fences, the boundaries, right? It makes you realize that even though I've never been on a prison yard, I have been in prison.
Right.
Within my own thoughts, within my own actions. And sometimes it feels like you have a boundary, right? There's a distance, and not only that, the humbleness of the stripping.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah.
And I'll just share a personal point with you is that unfortunately my son has been through this process. And I remember his first initial court visit, and his words to me when we got on the phone afterwards, he said, "I have never been so humiliated in my life. I've never felt so humiliated." And even though I didn't experience that with him, as his mother, I felt his spirit.
Right.
So as a reader to how Thibodeau explained his position, I felt his spirit, even though he was just a character in the book.
Yeah.
Does that make sense?
Most definitely. And you know, the hope was that even though many people haven't been in that prison setting, that they could connect with the mindset.
Right.
Because really, you know, the ideal of this writing has nothing to do with prison itself.
Right.
That's why, you know, like I said previously in the podcast interview, it had a different name, you know, Beyond the Barbed Wire, but that didn't work because I didn't want it to seem like it was a book about prison.
Right.
A portion of it is set there for a reason, but it has nothing to do with that overall. But when this opening scene of Thibodeau's, you know, sets the stage of the mindset that came along with that, which I think is so comparable to many of us, no matter what setting that we are in. Now, as you transition on into the next character who was introduced, which is actually our main character, Tyler, how was that transition for you?
It threw me off at first
Did
because
it catch you
I
off
thought,
guard?
I thought Thibodeau was the main character,
Right.
and then I start realizing that wait a minute, it's Tyler who this is about, and he's seeing it through the eyes of Thibodeau, right? He stumbles across his words, you know, and so it threw me off. I had to kind of like go back and read it again and go, wait a minute, who is talking, right? So, but then I realized that I'm Tyler in so many ways, right? Whether it's, you know, you pick up something and you're reading it and you're seeing it from that person's point of view, it's usually how it works, right? It's not until you see it from someone else's point of view that it really strikes you.
You know, I was telling you pre-conversation how I was at work when Queen first sent me the text of what you had said to her, how, you know, you couldn't stop reading it, and you know, you felt like Tyler, even though the situations were different.
Right.
And I love the fact that you stated that, because one of the biggest points about the book is that I truly believe it can transcend any and everybody. It's about being able to recognize yourself in these characters, even if the situations are nothing alike.
Right.
Because the book is about perception. It's about the lens we look through. And even though the settings could be worlds apart, the mindsets can always be so similar. Gender has nothing to do with it. Race has nothing to do with it. You know, the amount of money you have has nothing to do with it. It's about, how do I see life? How do I see these situations? And as these characters begin to unfold, they begin to show you more and more the similarities of what we see on a daily basis through our own eyes.
Absolutely.
You know, so when she shared that to me, you were one of the first reactions that I got. Because up to that point, I really hadn't had any feedback outside of hers. My father, who is not a reader at all. And, you know, she had read it so many times, she just tired of talking about it. You know, because she's seen with all its flaws, she's seen with all its errors. So for her, it wasn't even the opportunity to read from a place of enjoyment. It was more of, okay, you got to change this, you need to correction. Exactly. So we never was able to really have conversations in depth about the story itself. It was more about the structure. So to hear your words were pretty much the first true and clear assessment that I had gotten from somebody who was just reading it to be reading it. So that immediately hit me, right? And I told you once I got home, later on the same day, you had already texted her back saying that you had completed the book. And you told her you cried the last 10 pages?
Yeah, within the last 10 pages. Yeah.
It was amazing because as I'm sitting at the table and she's reading it to me, reading me the text, I couldn't help but be overwhelmed.
Right.
Not too manly to say that it brought me to tears, because the ideal of what I was putting time into day after day, week after week, was for the purpose of bringing forth something that would have an impact.
Right.
Something that I knew poured out of me for a reason, and hopefully that would be felt by somebody else. And so for you to be able to express that just hit me. And so I'm sitting at the table and tears are streaming down. And she grabbed my hand because I was having a moment.
Right.
I was really having a moment.
Right.
And I remember telling her before on the phone while I still was on the prison yard, I said, you know, as much as we want this book to do this and do that, if it can bless one person like the way I know it could, I've done my job.
Absolutely.
And here it was. I was getting that right off the bat.
Right.
You know,
Right.
so that blessed me so tremendously that, you know, it was immediate encouragement to really kind of certify that what I felt this was containing,
Right.
really what it was.
It was your confirmation.
That it was.
It was your confirmation. And the reason why, I was able to go through the book so quickly, not because I was trying to rush through it, but I took it with me on a camping trip, and I had nothing but time.
It's pretty, right?
And to be honest with you, when I first opened up the manuscript, I thought, all right, I'm going to give this a shot. I know I'm going to be distracted. I'm probably going to end up putting it down, and I won't get to it till later. But again, it drew me into something deeper because of something that I was dealing with within my own life.
Okay.
At that very moment, right? And we talked about this beforehand too earlier. Is that the one chapter that stood out to me was chapter 9, and I don't want to spoil it for anybody, but when you get there, you'll understand what I'm saying.
What's it called?
Farmer Brown.
Farmer Brown.
and I, at first I thought, all right, where is this going?
Right.
Because now we're talking about farming.
Yeah.
Right? But then the depth of it and the planting of the seeds, and again, not to go into too deep into it, but it was right then and there I realized my every word, my every action, my every reaction is me planting seeds.
Yeah.
Right? So it literally at that very moment caused me to see, and I think I said this to your wife, it caused me to see things differently at that very moment. That how I was handling my particular situation, I had to stop and say, okay, I got to see this through the eyes of not only Thibodeau, but Farmer Brown, Tyler,
right?
And even Tyler's wife, if you will.
Right, even Amber, right?
And I think I shared this too. There was a moment where I was like, Team Tyler, right? And I was like, poor Tyler, how could he, And again, that relation. But it wasn't until his wife started to share her perspective of things, and I was like, all right, pump the brakes. I'm starting to feel a little bit for her too.
Yeah.
And again, it's not because you can put yourself in their shoes. It comes down to empathy. It's understanding what they're going through, but in your own realm of things.
But look what I'm loving about what you're saying. Your connection to the characters.
Absolutely.
You're able to feel them. You actually are having feelings toward them, rooting for them in one form or fashion. And so that thrills me to know that you are able to really become immersed in the story. I had mentioned to you briefly that with the Farmer Brown chapter, I was actually advised to cut that down. And like, well, Farmer Brown chapter is kind of long. You might want to, it's some good stuff, but you might want to take. And I thought about what the person was saying to me. And I said, well, let let me go ahead and read over it again, because I hadn't really read it fully through until I got home, right after it had been edited and stuff. So I was doing one last browse through it, and I got to the From Brown chapter, and I remember what he was saying about it. So I said, okay, let me read through it, and maybe I do need to trim it. And the more I got through it, I was like, but every part is essential.
Absolutely.
And so when I got through, I said, you know what? Hey, I did read through it. I know it's long, but everything is needed.
Right. And I'm thankful that you didn't, because that's the chapter that really hit home.
Wow.
And made me realize that, again, you know, it's what we lay down. It's biblical, right? What we reap, we sow. And I think sometimes that scripture can be kind of looked at as, yeah, I know type scripture, right? It's the one we grow up already knowing as children, right? But when explained that way into the depth of it in that chapter, you understand that it's not just what we plant for ourselves, it's what we plant for others, and what we take for ourselves, we then pass down to strangers. You, in the book, you use an example of the person at the coffee shop behind the counter. The counter person. Right? And I could, at that very moment, I could count countless times that my reaction to whatever day I'm having was then planted into that counter person, right? And into someone else. And it again, it makes you, it made me want to go back and say, and I whether this is too deep or off topic, but we are currently right now in some biblical holidays of repentance and going back and asking for that forgiveness of our wrongdoing. And that the book causes you to almost want to lay it down and say, I need to talk to you for a minute, because how I handled this situation wasn't right, you know. And if a book can do that, you know what I'm saying.
Now, I've told Queen many times, it amazes me the levels to what this has turned into. Because when I was writing it initially, like I've said before, this was meant to be a memoir, and I was given, you know, insights of my own journeys, my own, you know, evolution per se, my transformation, the realizations of me seeing who I once was compared to who I was becoming, especially in the environment I was in. There was always reflections of that old man. So the first book was me just kind of documenting these things and talking about, you know, different events that took place that kind of magnified those perceptions. When the book turned out not being able to be published as a memoir, I didn't want to lose that, because I'm like, this is some important stuff. You know, everything that is coming out of me is definitely scales falling off my eyes. And I'm seeing these things differently for a reason. I have to share it, but now I gotta write a fictional story. So to be able to take those things and implant it into these characters in this way, I will forever say this was definitely not me. You know, I can easily say a soon-to-be best-selling book because God's fingerprints is all over it.
Yeah, absolutely.
All just when I go back and I read certain things, I'm like, I wrote that. I wrote that.
Yeah.
I had to be like, well, you go ahead. because it amazes me some of the things that flowed out. I mean, some of it got really deep. And I can remember when I was sitting there writing it, it poured out so effortlessly to the extent where I was like, yeah, I didn't even realize I was seeing it that way until I put it on paper. And then to hear you be able to put into words how that transcended to you, mind-boggling. You know, but there's further evidence of the powerful impact that this book has. You know, and that's why we continue to tell people, you know, of course we want the sales, of course we want the title of, you know, bestseller and all those wonderful things. I believe this is a movie, you know, waiting to be made.
Absolutely.
But even more importantly, how it will reach to the core of you, how it will speak to your very being. The characters, in some form or fashion, is a piece of all of us. And to be able to take this journey, just as Jasmine has, and be able to go through the different layers that she was able to discover, I think it's something that not just should be wanted, but is necessary.
Right.
And I would never, try to compare myself to C.S. Lewis, who I believe is one of the most prolific writers of all time. I'm not James Patterson. I'm not W.M. Paul Young, who wrote The Shack. I absolutely love that book.
Right.
And I would never try to put myself in that category. But I do believe that what is contained within these pages is something that can change lives. Because if you begin to recognize the lenses that they look through, which you begin to see, but also just in your very example of how the former Brown chapter impacted. Now, we're talking about a story, it's fictional.
Right.
But it was so powerful that it made you re-examine, maybe I need to go put this book down and go apologize. That speaks volumes.
Right, exactly.
You said you had highlighted some things that you had.
I did. One of this, and it's just a sentence, and it's in chapter 9, and it says, all content we are exposed to is done so to solicit a reaction. Even the one right behind that, the reaction itself doesn't have to be verbal. It can be emotional, actionable, and subconscious. So it's not just the things we say, it's the things we do. It's even the things we think.
Yeah.
That plants that blew me away.
I love that.
Like my thoughts are planting seeds,
Yeah.
and then I wonder why I'm in the situation I'm in. Right.
Yeah.
That was that right there. Like I said, just hearing this for the first time, and maybe you mentioned it before, that you went to reevaluate that chapter. It was written the way it was written for a reason.
Yeah.
Not just for me, because I'm one of thousands that are going to read this book, and I guarantee you,
Let's say millions.
Millions.
There you go.
Yeah, infinity.
We like that number.
But it's all going to be just a trickle effect of what I'm already saying.
Yeah.
They're gonna say the same things, not to the T, but they're gonna say the same things of, wow, this really spoke to me. Wow, it may not be Farmer Brown, it may not be chapter 9.
Right.
It might be other chapters in the book, but they're gonna hit a spot where God used every word that you wrote to speak to their life, right? No, you may not be those other authors, but that's how God intended it.
Right. True.
You are supposed to be you are to be unique, because your book is going to reach a certain area that those other books didn't. The Shack has its place, right? But your book also has its place. And as you went through, and I remember you mentioned something earlier, and it said it was like taking the scales off your eyes, and we didn't even mention the name Paul. But I remember when I first met your wife, Alitria, it was after a visit, and we were walking to our vehicles, and she shared how amazed she was with how God had been using you on the yards, right? Of all these men that you have impacted, my husband being one of them, that you were like a Paul in your situation, right?
Wow.
So because of that, you were writing these letters, if you will, right?
Go ahead, now, Joe.
And now it's a book.
Yeah.
Right? And
Never thought about it like that.
I'm watching it unfold, but never would I have thought to this extent or this degree.
Yeah.
But that just goes to show that's just how big God is. We can't label, we can't put an amount, nothing. It's beyond our understanding.
This is exactly why I wanted to start having conversations. Because I can say all day long how well a job I believe I did.
Right.
I can boast and brag about this being this and being that. But it's not until I begin to talk with people such as yourself who've experienced it that it brings its own validation. I've said time and time again that once people get the book in their hands, it's going to speak for itself.
Absolutely.
And you're going to want to tell other people about it because you've had an experience. It's more than just a good read. A friend of my mother's, she just got her book, and she texted my mother and said she was enjoying the book so much she almost peed on herself.
Yeah, because she didn't want to
stop reading to go to the bathroom.
I understand that.
I'm like, wait, what?
Yeah, yeah. Well, and that's the depth of it.
Yeah.
Yeah, and again, it's you can almost you almost feel like you're there with these characters, you know, and it goes back and forth. For a minute you're like, okay, I'm right there with Thibodeau, but then it brings you back and you're like, or I'm right there with Tyler, you know. I like there's a part in it where when Thibodeau realizes that, okay, my walk is deeper than this. God, you had your moment with God, you know, and I say you because I know that it wasn't just the character. We've all had these moments where we think we're talking to someone, and it's an angelic being, and it's God using that person, whether that person is real or not. It's an angelic encounter with God to confirm or to even give us the strength or the courage to move forward.
Yeah.
And I think that's what that encounter for him on the yard. And I again, I'm not trying to,
right.
but it's just, and when you get there and you read it and you understand that, man, how many times have I missed that, right? Or how many times have I been through that and I really didn't grasp it, but you grasp it at that moment with Thibodeau.
Yeah.
You know, and you think back, and I did. I sat there and I was like, how many times? And then to see it happen again and again throughout the book, it's just amazing. And that's where the tears started.
Right.
And towards the end, because it was just like, it really hit home. It hit major points in my life that have been happening in the last 3 years, where it allows you to see that even though bad things have happened, good comes out of it.
Right.
Look at the transformation of Tyler and his wife. That alone, I mean, and close the book, it's over, we're done. You know what I mean?
And it even speaks to the title itself. I mean,
yeah.
When we talk about looking through the fog, the ideal is that at some point in our lives, we all have been in the thick of it.
Oh.
And most times don't even realize it because it has become our norm.
Right.
I'm in this space, and even though I'm not happy in this space, I know this space. So I'm going to operate in this space. I'm going to function in this space.
Right.
Because I know nothing else but this space.
That's
And
right.
so for Tyler to be able to begin to recognize the space, for Thibodeau to express these spaces, and there'll be a correlation for this journey to even take place, you know, it makes me think about for myself how my journey unfolded and how can I best verbalize this, because if I felt this way and I've come to these realizations, I know I'm not the only one.
Absolutely, yeah.
And if I'm not the only one, how many countless others are trying to find their way out their fog and don't even realize they're in the fog?
Right.
You know, I said when I first got out, I did an interview in this very chair, and I was talking about how I truly believe everybody has a voice, but too often times we don't use it.
Right.
For me, what's expressed in this is not only my ideal of sharing that voice, but also trying to draw others into the space of saying, recognize what's in you, peel back the layers and share begin to speak upon what you're feeling, what you're dealing with, what you are recognizing that is off in your life. Right. Because once you can recognize that that fog is there, then you can begin to find sound resolution to come up out of it.
Right.
And it doesn't matter what area of your life you are in. You could be, you know, bottom out and trying to, claw yourself up, or you can already have it all figured out and just trying to top it off.
Right, or thinking that it's okay, thinking that, like you said, you know, we get comfortable with the fog, so we think that there's nothing wrong.
Yeah.
And I love the way the book says, when Tyler says, how long have I had this mask on, right? And it's time to take that mask. And how many masks are we wearing? Because it's not just one.
Yeah.
It can be a multitude of them. So it's one of those things where I could sit here and tell somebody about the book, but what it comes down to is I hand it over to them. I'm like, you gotta get this book. It is a definite read, and the more hands that it falls into, the more lives it's gonna change.
Amen to that. I was asked a question in the podcast, and I have to now deflect this question to you. The question was from me: what's the one thing I want readers to walk away with when they're done reading?
Mm.
So you being a reader, I gave my answer of what I would like people to experience. But what would you say was the biggest thing that you walked away with once you finished reading this?
Like I said, it was chapter 9, and the planting of the seeds, and understanding that it's more than just my words. It's my actions. And I think to take from that is understanding is that I need to be more cautious of where, and what I'm planting. Right? Not just that, words are, they cause wounds that take a lifetime to heal.
Very true.
So I think for me, that was my takeaway for me. And I'm excited every time you post a video of someone who's I got mine, you got yours, and I'm like, oh, I can't wait to hear what it's gonna do for them, right? Because it's gonna be different but the same.
Yeah.
So, but that is definitely my takeaway, is that I need to be more careful of what I lay down.
Well, I truly do appreciate you taking time to sit down and express those thoughts, and it means the world to me. I will ask you one last thing. Is there anything that you would like to leave with those who are watching this to encourage them to pick up this book?
Well, I think enough has been said tonight to encourage you, hopefully, but though you have to get this book. That's all there is to it. From the beginning to the end, it is a book that you will find very difficult to put down. So I leave you with, don't hesitate. We have made it available in many fashions. So find your way. Look him up, Folo Patterson. Reach out to any of us to find out how to get this book, because it is definitely a life changer, for sure.
Well, there you have it. My book, Looking Through the Fog, by Folo Patterson. You may find it at folopatterson.com. I'm on all social media outlets, Facebook, Instagram, Twitter. There's no excuse not to be able to find this book. But more importantly, once you do, it's going to find you. All right? So don't hesitate. Don't delay. Thank you. Next time, we will have a conversation with someone else. Y'all be blessed.